Welcome back to Issues of Faith. We're talking about a documentary called The Disturbances. We have with us Robert Parham, executive editor of ethicsdaily.com, part of the Baptist Center for Ethics. Produced several documentaries. This one will air in our area several times. And this was a personal one for you, as we discussed. Your father, a missionary in Nigeria 50 years ago when this genocide took place, 30,000 people killed. And he didn't talk about it much with you. How did that happen? You said it has to take planning. It happened over a 2-day period. Was there some indication that something this horrible and violent was going to take place?
There were rumors that trouble was going to start. In May, there had been a flash of riots, and my father had been caught in those in another town called Zaria. But it was very brief, a day or so, and ended. And at that point, many of the Igbos in northern Nigeria began to leave by train and lorry to their homeland. But they had reassurance from the Nigerian government and from their own leaders that this wasn't going to happen again, to stay and continue working, that we could work all these things out. That was not to be the case. And so it's in September of the same year that over a several-day period that these atrocities were implemented.
So again, your father, a missionary, there had been missionaries there for a long period of time. Do they feel responsible in some way? Do they think this can't happen to people we're ministering to? I mean, what was the sense there?
There was a sense of denial that this could happen. There was a sense that they didn't know what to believe about the rumors they heard. And after it was over, a group of missionary leaders met, and one of the missionaries who was with the Church of the Brethren admitted that the church had not done a good job teaching about peace and reconciliation, that had been a failure on the part of the church, and he lamented that greatly.
How do we change that? They've been there, they're preaching. I mean, that's what's the lesson there?
There are a number of stages to genocide, and we can look for those, and we see these over and over again. And one is that one group of people begins to demonize another group of people. They begin to assign derogatory terms to them or names to them. And so when we see that begin to happen, that's a pretty good clue that unrest is on the way. So you look at what happened in Rwanda, or you look at what happened in Bosnia, and you see the demonization of people, one group against another group. And that escalates over time unless it's addressed.
And we have heard of Rwanda and certainly Bosnia, some of the ones you've mentioned. How common is this 30,000 people killed and we've never heard of it? It's just kind of, it happens over a short period of time, and then things go back to some kind of normalcy. Not that you can after something that horrific, but we don't know anything. We've never heard anything about it. How does that happen? How often does this kind of thing happen? One
of the short answers to why we did not hear about what happened, or the Western world did not hear about what happened in Nigeria, is that the winners write the history. And after the genocide in September and early October, the Easterners retreated to their homeland, and a year later they declared independence, which then began the Biafran War. The Biafran War went on for about 3 years. Most Americans, or many Americans, have heard something about the Biafran War. There were about 1.5 million people that starved to death in that war. But the federal government won the war. And having won the war, they could then control the telling of the story. And as one Igbo scholar said to us, we've not done a good job telling our story. We did a screening at Stanford University last week in which 6 Nigerians attended, and they said to the person that our parents never told us what happened. So again, it happened and people didn't know how to process it, and they just didn't talk about it.
And so this will be shown to churches, to universities. What do you hope comes from it? Because if I say, well, let's go watch a documentary about something that happened 50 years ago in Nigeria, a terrible thing, people might say, what do you hope? Why is this important now, today, to all of us?
The documentary offers an alternative narrative in our culture to a dominant narrative that is opposed to churches being involved in missions and sending missionaries. And that negative narrative is rooted in some misunderstanding. This documentary shows what missionaries did without any training, in a spontaneous manner, as humanitarians, to hide Igbos at great risk, and then to care for the wounded and then get survivors to safety. That's a positive story about what missionaries did. At the same time, it's a story about missionaries, but it's also a story that we think will lead to a wider discussion of genocide. For example, there are accusations of genocide in northern Nigeria, northeastern Nigeria, by Boko Haram this very day. There's genocide by ISIS against certain religious groups, including Muslims, in the Middle East. There are accusations of genocide in South Sudan. So genocide is not a spontaneous, occasional event. It seems to be an event that goes on with great frequency, and not all the genocide stories get the kind of coverage that took place either out of Bosnia, Rwanda, or the Holocaust.
So would you say, is this a call for more mission, more missionaries, more mission work?
I think it's certainly a call for the church to be well acquainted with what is genocide, how to recognize the signs of genocide, and to speak forcefully to governments and non-governmental organizations about addressing those issues before the killing begins.
When you list off the problems the world faces, they're scary, and there's, I think there's an inclination sometimes to just isolate ourselves. People can be scared enough just in their own neighborhood, whether that's appropriate or not. You start bringing on this, you start talking about South Sudan and Nigeria 50 years ago. That's almost overload. Does it concern you that there is an inclination, if you see it that way, to just isolate ourselves?
There certainly is a temptation for many people in churches to isolate themselves from the rest of the world and to engage in a kind of denial that if we don't think about it, it's not happening. If we don't talk about it, we're not responsible.
And you don't think that's a good thing?
I think it's a pretty tragic thing. I think the houses of faith in this country have a lot of influence and need to channel that influence in constructive ways to address real-life issues, especially those issues that occur abroad.
And are we doing enough now?
Many evangelical leaders are being very vocal about genocide and the persecution of Christians abroad. And I think that helps to spark a larger conversation about that particular concern.
Now, all right, the Baptist Center for Ethics. You've produced several documentaries. This is one of them. Kind of, what is the life? How does this progress? Where does this go? And how have some of your other documentaries gone?
Well, we've done a number of documentaries. One was titled Different Books, Common Word, and it was about how Baptists and Muslims have very different sacred books, but they have a common word, which is love for neighbor. and that documentary appeared on a couple of networks and was widely used in churches. Then we produced one titled Gospel Without Borders on what the Christian churches were doing about the situation with the undocumented. And the Christian church has been really at the cutting edge of speaking up for the undocumented and embracing refugees, which runs really counter to where many people are politically.
But you can make the argument that's where Jesus would have been.
You certainly could. And there are some people that talk about how Jesus was an alien since he was born in Egypt, and they played with that idea.
It's a fascinating discussion, and I think it's important work, and I thank you for being here. Robert Parham, the executive editor, ethicsdaily.com, with the new film, The Disturbances, a very interesting documentary. Thank you for being here. Thank all of you for watching Issues of Faith. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you very much.